So LeBron James' agent, Rich Paul, made headlines earlier this week when he suggested on his podcast that the Lakers trade Austin Reaves for Grizzlies All-Star Jaren Jackson Jr. But after last night's Lakers win, LeBron tried to distance himself from his agent's comments. James told ESPN in his way out of Crypto.com Arena this, quote, "I think you all know by now, Rich is his own man, and what Rich says is not a direct reflection of me and how I feel. And I hope people know that. I hope people know that, and if they're not sensible to know that, then I don't know what to tell them."
LeBron James just looked straight into the camera and told everyone that his best friend and agent Rich Paul speaks for himself, not for the king. Apparently, we're supposed to believe that the guy who built an entire sports empire on LeBron's back just randomly suggests trades without checking with his meal ticket first. The audacity is almost impressive. Do you actually believe LeBron has zero influence over Klutch Sports decisions, or is this just another case of plausible deniability? Drop your honest thoughts below.
But the point is that when you think about Rich Paul and his ascension, give respect and deference where he's due. He's a good brother, he's doing great things, and he's gonna continue to do great things. But he has to accept something, okay? You have a podcast now as an agent. Now you ain't some rookie that just arrived, Swagoo. You've been in this game a while. I'm talking about Rich Paul. You've made deals. You've influenced deals being made. You've been accused of influencing deals that have been made. And we all know you're attached at the hip to LeBron James. So when you say something about something that directly impacts LeBron James, that is going to be the assumption, whether fair or unfair. And Rich Paul is entirely too smart not to know that.
So LeBron James just gave an interview to ESPN after the Lakers beat the Hawks, and he decided it was time to address some comments his agent Rich Paul made on a podcast. Rich Paul, who runs Klutch Sports, went on his show with Max Kellerman and casually suggested that the Lakers should trade Austin Reaves for Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Memphis Grizzlies. Pretty specific trade suggestion for someone who supposedly has nothing to do with Lakers operations, right? But here's where it gets good. LeBron's response to all this was to basically say, "What Rich says is not a direct reflection of me and how I feel."
I met LeBron because of this jersey I had on, this Warren Moon jersey. I'm flying out of Akron Canton Airport. I'm waiting at the gate, and this kid asked me about my jersey. I always liked fashion, no matter what it was. He had on a replica jersey, and I didn't want to make fun of his replica, but I was trying to educate him where he can get the hot shit. That kid happened to be LeBron James.
Here, Rich was selling jerseys out of his car trunk. That's not exactly the origin story of a business mogul, but LeBron saw something in him, brought him into his inner circle along with Maverick Carter and Randy Mims. And for about a decade, Rich was just part of the crew. Then in 2012, Rich decides to start a sports agency, and shocker, his very first client is LeBron James. Now here's where the math stops making sense for anyone with a functioning brain. A guy in his early 30s with no college degree, no law background, no formal training in contract negotiation, just starts an agency, and within 12 years it becomes the most powerful agency in the NBA. Klutch Sports now represents over 200 athletes across the NBA and NFL. They have more NBA players than any other agency on the planet. And we're supposed to believe this happened purely because Rich Paul is just that naturally gifted at business?
Now again, LeBron's not lying. Rich can be his own man. Trust me, Rich has his own opinions, okay? He thinks for himself. Respect that man. The flip side to it, however, is that there's also a history with LeBron James directly or indirectly influencing team moves and using media, podcasts, and other forms of media to do it. That's a fact. And when that's the reality, you gotta know if you're Rich Paul, and when you open your mouth, the assumption is, oh, this is something that LeBron James is feeling. Rich Paul is speaking for it.
Most sports agents have law degrees. They understand contract law. They can navigate the complex legal frameworks involved in multi-million-dollar negotiations. Rich Paul's qualification was being LeBron's friend. That's it. And yet somehow he built an empire that influences not just player contracts, but entire team rosters, front office decisions, and now apparently media narratives too. The NBA investigated LeBron's connections to Klutch Sports and found no conflict of interest. They claim he owns no stake in the company, at least nothing they can trace on paper. But come on, does anyone actually believe that? The conflict of interest isn't about ownership percentages on some corporate document. It's about influence, and LeBron's influence over Klutch is absolute and undeniable.
There's a whole bunch of people that believes, especially somebody as influential as him, who wheels and deals and is getting deals done and is making things happen, have no business doing a podcast. In fairness to him, there were a whole bunch of people who believe that LeBron James had no business doing a podcast. Obviously, that led to, Darvin Ham being let go by the Lakers and J.J. Redick ultimately landing that job.
Remember the Anthony Davis situation? That's the perfect example of how this whole system works. In 2018, Anthony Davis was a top 5 to 10 player in the league, still under contract with New Orleans for 2 more years. Then suddenly he signs with Klutch Sports, and within months he's demanding a trade. Not just any trade though, specifically a trade to the Lakers, the exact team where LeBron James plays. And somehow, we're all supposed to pretend that's just a wild coincidence. The Pelicans had to deal with that mess for months. Davis stopped trying. The team's chemistry imploded, and eventually they had no choice but to trade him to Los Angeles. That trade directly benefited LeBron James by pairing him with another superstar. And the agency that orchestrated the whole thing? Klutch Sports, run by LeBron's best friend, who supposedly operates completely independently from LeBron's interests. Now, Klutch's influence is spreading beyond just player representation. They're getting involved in content creation and media. Gilbert Arenas recently mentioned on his show that they're working on something with Klutch Sports. So now the agency that represents LeBron is also influencing the content that talks about LeBron. That's not a conflict of interest. That's a full-blown media manipulation operation disguised as a sports agency.
And you tie that in with the coach talking about the defensive deficiencies that this team has had earlier in the year and maybe now.
The specific comments that triggered LeBron's denial are actually kind of funny when you break them down. Rich Paul goes on his podcast and suggests the Lakers should trade Austin Reaves to Memphis for Jaren Jackson Jr. He frames it like he's doing both teams a favor, saying Austin deserves to get paid and the Lakers need defense. It's a detailed, specific trade proposal involving LeBron's current team and one of their key players. And Rich just casually throws this out there without thinking it might look bad for his biggest client?
If I was the Lakers, I would probably be targeting the Memphis Grizzlies as a trade partner
For?
Jaren Jackson.
Yeah. That'd be a great fit.
I would.
For whom?
Well, that's the thing, because you got to figure out the package. But some way, somehow, I would be trying to get Jaren Jackson, maybe get back G.G. Jackson and Jackson Associates, because he's a young player that you can develop, got good size, can shoot the ball. But I think if you're building around Luka going forward, which they are,
You need a guy like that.
you need that anchor. And Jaren doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. They just put Ja Morant on the market, right? Saying that they're willing to trade him, etc.
Rich Paul is supposed to be this genius businessman who built the most powerful agency in basketball. But he somehow didn't realize that publicly suggesting his client's team trade away a fan-favorite player would make people question whether LeBron was involved in that decision. Either Rich Paul is secretly an idiot, or more likely, he knew exactly what he was doing, and LeBron knew too.
But this comes with
Austin Reaves.
This comes with a very unemotional attachment, because Austin is beloved, which he should be.
But he's about to get
paid. He's an underdog. And here's the thing. If there's a world where you can do what's best for your team and do what's best for Austin, because Austin deserves to get paid right now. I love him as a Laker, but if that is a situation where we get in balance, because if you put all the money into just the backcourt, and then you're kind of like, your flexibility is restricted going forward to fill out the rest of the team, then that's kind of like riding when you used to have the training wheels on your bike, but the one training wheel is off and it kind of leans.
To be fair, the trade actually would make some sense for the Lakers. They desperately need defense, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is a former Defensive Player of the Year. Pairing him with Luka Doncic, who's now on the Lakers, would give them a legitimate two-way lineup. But here's the problem with that trade. Austin Reaves is only making $13 million this year and has a player option for $14 million next year that he's definitely declining. He's about to hit free agency and get paid. Meanwhile, Jaren Jackson Jr. is locked into a massive contract with Memphis through 2030, making around $50 million per year starting next season. That's $186 million total. For the salaries to match in a trade, the Lakers would need to do a sign-and-trade with Reeves, which means convincing him to agree to go to Memphis instead of testing free agency. That's a complicated negotiation that would require coordination between multiple parties, including Reeves himself. So when Rich Paul suggests this specific trade on his podcast, he's not just throwing out a random idea. He's proposing a complex multi-team negotiation that would completely reshape the Lakers roster. And we're supposed to believe LeBron had no idea this was coming and doesn't agree with it? The whole thing is absurd. LeBron's denial is particularly insulting because it treats fans like they're stupid. Everyone knows how this works. Everyone understands that Rich Paul and LeBron James are essentially operating as one unit. But LeBron keeps up this charade of separation because it gives him plausible deniability when things go wrong or when public opinion turns against Klutch's moves. When Anthony Davis forced his way to the Lakers, LeBron could say he had nothing to do with it, even though his agent orchestrated the whole thing. When Klutch clients mysteriously end up on LeBron's teams, or when players leave LeBron's teams and suddenly switch agents, LeBron can claim innocence. It's a convenient system that lets him control everything while taking responsibility for nothing. The funniest part of Rich Paul's comments on the podcast is when he talks about doing what's best for Austin Reaves, because Austin deserves to get paid. That's such obvious PR spin, it's almost insulting. Austin Reaves is about to hit free agency where he'll get massive offers from multiple teams. Trading him to Memphis, a small market team that's not contending for championships, doesn't help Austin get paid. It helps the Lakers avoid a bidding war for his services and helps them acquire a player they actually want. Rich frames it like he's being generous to Austin, but he's really suggesting the Lakers dump him before they have to pay him what he's worth on the open market. That's not looking out for Austin. That's looking out for the Lakers' salary cap situation. And who benefits most from the Lakers having a better roster and more cap flexibility? LeBron James. The broader issue here is that Klutch Sports has become so powerful that they can essentially dictate terms to NBA teams. If a Klutch client wants out of a situation, the agency can make life miserable for that franchise until they get what they want. They can leak information to friendly media members. They can have the players stop trying. They can create public pressure through their network of content creators and journalists who are now apparently working with them. That kind of power is dangerous for the league because it puts agents above teams and organizational stability. Front offices are supposed to make decisions based on what's best for the franchise. But when one agency has the power to destroy your team's chemistry and tank a player's value if you don't cooperate, suddenly you're making decisions based on keeping Klutch happy. And at the center of all this influence is LeBron James, the guy who supposedly has no connection to any of it. The guy who just happens to have been best friends with Rich Paul for 25 years, who just happened to be his first client, who just happens to benefit whenever Klutch clients force trades to his teams. All pure coincidence, apparently.
The training wheels analogy that Rich Paul uses on his podcast is actually revealing. He talks about how if you put all your money into the backcourt, you lose flexibility to fill out the rest of the roster. And it's like riding a bike with one training wheel off. It's a weird metaphor, but the point is clear. Rich is thinking about the Lakers' roster construction like he's part of the front office. He's not just representing his clients, he's trying to build the Lakers roster the way he thinks it should be built. That's not an agent's job. An agent is supposed to advocate for their individual clients' interests, not play general manager for an entire team. But Rich Paul does this constantly because Klutch Sports isn't really an agency in the traditional sense. It's more like an extension of LeBron's control over his basketball environment. LeBron has spent his entire career trying to control everything around him. He's formed super teams, he's influenced coaching hires and fires, he's pushed for specific trades and free agent signings. That's all documented and not even particularly controversial at this point. But the Klutch connection gives him a level of influence that goes beyond just being a powerful player. It lets him shape rosters across the entire league through his agent's client base. When LeBron says Rich Paul's comments don't reflect his feelings, he's technically creating legal distance between himself and Klutch. That way, if the league ever seriously investigates tampering or conflicts of interest, he can point to quotes like this and claim independence. But anyone watching this situation with clear eyes knows that's nonsense. The really frustrating part is that the NBA lets this happen. They investigated and found no conflict of interest because they're looking for formal ownership stakes or financial ties they can document. But the real conflict isn't financial, it's operational. LeBron doesn't need to own shares in Klutch to control it. His relationship with Rich Paul and his status as the agency's most important client gives him all the control he needs. What makes this even more obvious is that Rich Paul has never contradicted LeBron publicly, has never made a move that hurt LeBron's interests, and has never represented a player in a way that conflicted with what LeBron wanted. Because of course he hasn't. Their interests are completely aligned because they're essentially the same entity operating under different names. The Austin Reaves situation is just the latest example. Rich Paul suggests trading him right when Reeves is about to get paid and become expensive for the Lakers. That helps LeBron by keeping the roster flexible. It helps Klutch by potentially moving Reeves to a situation where he's less visible and creating an opening for another Klutch client to join the Lakers. It benefits everyone except Austin Reaves himself and Lakers fans who actually like watching him play. And when people point out how suspicious this all looks, LeBron just shrugs and says, "Rich speaks for himself." It's gaslighting on a massive scale, and the annoying part is that it works. Enough people either don't pay attention or don't care that LeBron gets away with maintaining this fiction of separation. The comment about how people should be buying this is perfect because nobody actually is buying it. Everyone knows what's happening. Sports media knows, other players know, front offices definitely know. But everyone plays along with the charade because that's how the system works. LeBron is too powerful and too important to the league's business to actually hold accountable for this stuff. So LeBron James expects you to believe his best friend and agent operates completely independently without ever consulting him about major decisions. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. This whole Klutch situation is one giant conflict of interest dressed up with plausible deniability. Like and subscribe for more breakdowns of NBA nonsense.